Hi there, good afternoon, and welcome to another session where we sit down and talk about some concepts, some approach, some technique, and of course, sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather. Damn. But with that, I welcome you to BYJU'S Exam Prep channel dedicated to your success as a CAT aspirant. My name is Vikrant. I am your personal coach for all things related to English and communication skills. I also dive deeper into the psychological aspects of our preparation. So if you happen to have any question, any concern throughout the session, please do not hesitate to drop it in the chat. And that is just one of the places. What if you have a question after the session? Oh, in that case, you can just fill out our CAT counseling form. You'd find the link as a pinned comment in the chat. I'll also request my team to share it with you in between. So what that counseling form does is that it gives you an opportunity to sit down with one of us in a one-on-one conversation where you get to discuss your specific challenges, issues, concerns, and that can hopefully help you kickstart your preparation or put it back on track, right? So let's go ahead and talk about difficult RC passages. But before that, a quote that is very relevant, and that's the kind of attitude that you really need to possess. I was just talking to somebody yesterday and he said that, oh, I found XYZ difficult in the ZAT paper, and because of that I could not solve the rest of the exam properly. So you notice there are times when what we cannot attempt goes on to affect what we can and what we should and what we must. So it is going to happen in every exam where you may not be able to attempt some of the things that are given to you. Don't worry about them, just focus on what you can do, but that is for the exam. When it comes to preparation, especially when you see this entire year ahead of you, you of course can go ahead and attempt it in a significantly different manner. So difficult passages, right? So how do we really decide that a given passage is difficult? What's your parameter? How would we label a passage as difficult? So there is an objective way of labeling a passage as difficult, and that is the method that I use for our mock tests when the mocks are over. I cannot do it before. It can only happen after. Okay. So what is this method? What is this process? So I just look at two parameters. The two parameters are the number of students who attempted that particular question and the number of students who got that question right. So if not many people got it right, then I know that the question is difficult. This attempted bit adds some nuance. Now what kind of nuance? So attempted is if a lot of people did not attempt, then it basically tells you that the question looked difficult. That is why they left it. On the other hand, if a lot of people attempted it, we can be reasonably sure that it at least looked easy. Now, out of those who attempted it, if a majority ended up getting it right, then you know that it was actually an easy question. And on the other hand, if a majority ended up getting it wrong, then we know that this must have been a difficult question. So it all boils down to a basic combination of these two things, right? So that is how I do it. But then this is post facto. When you sit down to attempt a paper, you don't have that information, and therefore whatever you label, whether you label a passage as difficult, whether you label it as easy, at the end of the day it is going to be very subjective. So all of us have had a different journey of life, and that journey would make some things easy for you, some things difficult for you, and I think you would essentially be taking that judgment call. But that said, in general, what is it that can make a passage difficult? So the very first source of difficulty obviously is the subject matter of the passage. So if the passage talks about an area, a subject matter that you are not familiar with, and on top of that, that area also happens to have a lot of jargon, then chances are oh, that's 99.6. That sounds great. Fabulous, man. So for example, a lot of people struggle when the passages are based on philosophy, when the passages are based on psychology. I have over the years seen some people who struggle with passages that talk about hardcore political theory, particularly those aspects of political theory that pertain to uh, the concept of justice, right? So that is one bit. Now the next bit, so very frequently we would find a passage difficult because of the subject matter of the passage. Rarely people may find it difficult because of the language that is used in the passage. So there are times when the language could be Old English, and that Old English bit can make it challenging for quite a few people. There are times when your passage can be full of difficult, demanding, challenging words, and that can go ahead and make the passage difficult. But this is not a very common cause for the source of difficulty, and the reason is, at the end of the day, the examiner is trying to see whether you can deal with the kind of English that you find in the world around you, especially in formal situations, and therefore those obscure language, Old English, very challenging words are not that common in the exams. Then the third reason or the third source of difficulty could be the type of question that has been used. So for example, some question types are easy. When you talk about a specific detail question or a fact-based question, they are easy, and a majority of the people are able to deal with them with ease. On the other hand, when the questions become indirect, when the questions ask you to figure out, let's say, a parallel situation, when they ask you to strengthen or weaken, when they ask you for the most likely source of the passage, those are the kind of things that can actually be quite demanding. On top of that, CAT has this tendency of creating these convoluted question stems where they won't even straight away ask you which of the following weakens. They may go ahead and get into some fancy stuff. So instead of saying which of the following weakens, they'd say which of the following, if true, would most strengthen the argument presented in the passage, except. Now that's a fair bit. So how do you go ahead and deal with that except? So those kind of things. So question types, and then finally the last bit is, of course, the answer choices. So you need to look at how close those answer choices are or how ambiguous those answer options are. So I'd say normally when it comes to CAT or XAT, wherever the difficulty level is higher, we generally see that options are close, and particularly in XAT they can also be ambiguous where more than one answer choice appears right. So these are the four things that we typically look at and that we typically go by. So how do we now approach such difficult passages? So that said, your exam is still at least 10 months away, and therefore your approach would actually be to reduce the possibility of finding something difficult. So this is, at the end of the day, we know that difficult is subjective. We know from which all places it can come from, right? So how about turning a lot of these difficult passages into something that you and I would actually term easy moving forward? So how do we do that? So here is the first strategy. I'll just rejig the animation so that I'm able to create some room for myself that I could actually go ahead and write as well. So the very first thing that you and I can do is make sure that we are already okay with a wide variety of subject matters. So that philosophy, psychology, political theory, linguists, art, whatever. So make sure that you read more and make sure that there is enough diversity in your reading, or in other words, I am asking you to read, but then I'm saying that your reading should be extensive and eclectic, right? So if you do that, the problem that comes to you from that subject matter aspect, that problem will go away. Additionally, the second reason was question types. So how about understanding and mastering each one of the 20 different question types? So yes, that's all that you have there. RC does not have an infinite kind of things that can be tested. There are just these 20 odd question types. If you've been attempting RC passages regularly, by now you may have identified some areas that pose a problem for you, okay? Some areas that are more of a challenge for you. So go ahead and ensure that you attempt those question types a little more. That you dive deeper into mastering the concepts of each one of those question types. So for example, a lot of reasoning based questions in RC, people tend to struggle with those. So if you are somebody who struggles with those reasoning based questions, I think the best thing that you can do is focus a little more on critical reasoning, start from there and then take it up from there. So if you're not able to get, say, the inference questions right or the assumption questions right, it will be a great idea to move back to your concepts of CR and then mastering those. And then apart from that, the third and the last thing that you can become really good at is eliminating close answer choices. I'm sorry, my nose and ears are all blocked. I'm not even able to hear myself properly, but because my nose is blocked, I could sound a little nasal. And if that is happening, my apologies in advance. I will sound like Himesh Reshamia, but then you'd have to bear with it today. So anyhow, so these three things basically will help you become and perform in a really nice, really impactful manner. Okay, and then additionally, at the end of the day, you will be writing mock tests, you will be writing actual exams, and you may still come across some passages that are difficult. So what do you do there? So specifically for the exam, I think before you start solving the passages, it is a terrific, wonderful idea to go ahead and prioritize them on the basis of how difficult you think they are. And then mind you, you cannot really evaluate the difficulty level of answer choices at this level. That is way too time consuming. All that you can do is look at a couple of basic parameters. So basic parameter number one, you can look at the subject matter of the passage, and basic parameter number two, you can look at the length of the passage and the number of questions that it has. So start with that, okay, passage prioritization. So that would ensure that you are able to go from a passage that you think is easier towards and move towards a passage that you find a little difficult, and then that would mean that you leave the difficult passage for the end. You don't even need to attempt it at the beginning. In fact, in some cases, I will venture out and say as much as you don't even need to attempt it. So all of us have different strengths, and we focus that we basically play around our strengths. So if English is not an area where you can dominate the competition, it's okay to have this in mind that I'm going to leave one or two passages out or whatever, right? but at least leave them for the end. You'd solve them only if time permits. But that said, it is a perceived level of difficulty, because at the end of the day, what makes a passage truly difficult are the answer choices, how close they are. That is what makes them challenging, and therefore I would say that even those passages that may appear difficult, they could have questions and especially options that are easy. So do not start with this notion that, hey, it is too tough, I'm not going to attempt it. If time permits, you should go ahead and give yourself enough room, enough space to attempt it. Learn to take those challenging passages on, and very soon you'd realize that you'd grow in confidence, and you'd also see that a lot of those supposedly difficult passages actually have easy questions. So walk along those lines, and I'm sure you'll do significantly better. So let's dive into a couple of passages where the perceived level of difficulty is going to be a little on the higher side, but that's what this session is about. So I typically take you through a passage paragraph by paragraph, but in the first passage, the very first paragraph was fairly lengthy. That left me with no choice but to break it down into two. So slide 1 and slide 2 will give you the first paragraph. Okay, and once you've read it, let me know so that I can take you over to the next one. So here you go. The first half of the first paragraph, read it carefully, and then we'll see. Okay, so here is the next part of the paragraph. Okay, sure. So should I take you over to the next one now? There you go. This is the next paragraph. Read this one carefully and then we'll see. Done? Okay, so let's dive into the question now. So here is the first question for you. What do you think should the answer be? So what's your take on this? Okay, so let's now look at this particular question. Uh, Now, I so very frequently ask everybody to continue to work on vocabulary, and that is because quite often your questions may require vocabulary. For example, this particular question, it is a pernicious presentism. Now, what is presentism? Presentism basically means an uncritical adherence to present day attitude, especially this tendency to interpret the past events through this lens of modern values and concepts. Okay, and pernicious is harmful, right? So this harmful tendency to look at the past from the lens of present day values. So once you know this, you'd realize that option A is eliminated because the people dismissing animal trials is basically contrasting past versus present. So it is not talking about presentism. But B is the one which talks about that lens of looking at past events in terms of modern values, and that is why this goes on to become our best answer choice here. Here is the next one for you. Question number 2 on your screen. Go ahead and give this one a shot. Okay, so let's go ahead and have a look at question number 2. Which of the following cannot be called true? So if I look at A, people occasionally deride the history of animal trials. This is something that can be inferred from the passage. In fact, there are hints of it in the first paragraph. Then even if you look at the second paragraph, it has this line which says, because it is a phenomenon that is newly pertinent, it is imperative for us to think of the history of animal trials in a more nuanced light. And the next part, beyond the mocking tone in which it can sometimes be discussed. So A is definitely true. And because it is true, it can be ruled out as our answer. Let's have a look at B. Legal reasoning may be more extensive than we expect. The very first line of the second paragraph tells you that, I'll just take you back to that slide. This will be easier that way. Here, not just about unexpectedly expansive legal reasoning. Now, what do you understand by expansive? Expansive is something that covers a wide area in terms of space or scope. A synonym will be extensive, right? So when you look at second, maybe more extensive than we expect, that's something that's once again true. Then legal proceedings can have multiple purposes. If you go back to the reference to that book, Discipline and Punish by Michael Foucault, talks about pre-modern legal proceedings were not necessarily intended to reduce crime or even to punish, but that they are better understood as a political ritual. So from there we can infer C as well. So that's also true. So I'm pretty optimistic about D as an answer. Now, animal trials show similarities between animals and humans. Unfortunately, no, they do not show similarities between animals and humans. In fact, the line is that it is a metaphysical position about the similarity. It is not a fact, and therefore D is not true, and that is what makes D the right answer for this particular question. Here is the next one. Question number 3 on your screen, a little longer, but I'm sure you can deal with it. Go ahead and tell me what you think. Okay, I think I'm eating into a bit of the slide, so all right, so let's go ahead and dive into this one now. So this question basically asks us for the correct interpretation of the word ironically. So we need to look at the starting and the ending of the passage to get the second idea, to get the central idea. And then in the last bit, if you were to look at it, you'd realize that the very last sentence actually starts with the word ironically, right? The very last sentence starts with the word ironically. So the irony here is that the trial that was not even meant for animals but humans ended up telling us a little more about what humans thought, because the lawyers, because the rats won. So people thought that they're obviously going to not win, and that is where I would say that the irony lies. An unexpected discovery lies, and that is best captured by option B, and therefore that is the one that we should go ahead and mark as our answer. So that's about this particular passage, and let's pause here. And in case you want to work even more closely with us, we have a very comprehensive CAT 24 program that you can join in. You can experience it through a free trial. You can also fill out that counseling form and talk to us if you want to know more about this course and your preparation in general. We have produced amazing results in the past, and that's where I stop today. So I look forward to meeting you in our next session very soon. Until then, stay safe, stay focused, stay in touch. Do reach out to us at any of these platforms. Add that counseling form if you need any further inputs. That's it from me today. I look forward to meeting you really soon in my next session tomorrow.